right, we're ready to start our session on the budget, and I will turn it over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is the time during our budget preparation where we follow up with you all from the conversations that we've had previously through all the briefings, the presentation of the budget, and the public hearings to identify anything that you want to discuss further as we move toward next week's adoption of the budget. So as far as the presentation, I'm going to give a two slide. It's a very quick overview of the FY24 budget. Again, you all have had the budget for a couple of weeks, so it's more of a reminder of what is in it. We've got the one page kind of at a glance there at your desk as well in case you need to refer to anything. So that's just going to take a couple of slides. And then I've identified a number of the items that were raised either by council when we submitted the budget, for example, the elderly and disabled real estate tax freeze, or that came up in the conversation at the public hearing on the budget itself as well. And I'll come back to this slide in just a second, because then I'm going to ask, in light of kind of time, are there any of these items that are on this list, and I don't know how the right way to ask is, that you want to talk about or that you don't want to talk about? We'll come back to this one in just a second so that we can kind of be as expeditious with our time as we can. And then at the very end, we'll just sort of remind everyone of the schedule for the adoption stuff.
Mr. Cowell, real quick, I wasn't at the public hearing. I did try to watch some of it. I didn't get through all of it. Did you put any of those suggestions into this?
That'll be in the presentation. So what you've got is, the one page is what was handed out when the budget was delivered.
Okay.
So that has not changed,
okay.
obviously. Yeah.
Where?
Oh, it's
It
In
may
the
be
copy
up,
of the
it may be up on the
presentation,
dais.
So as far as the overview, as I mentioned, we're kind of nearing the end of the process, with May 8th being the adoption date for the budget, as is shown on the graphic that is here and also in the draft budget that was presented. This process, as you all know probably all too well, begins all the way back in the summer, and it starts back with your strategic planning retreat, followed by the budget planning retreat, and then staff does some initial work to get information from the departments, and then ultimately we do those monthly briefings leading up, obviously, to the delivery of the recommended budget, the public hearing, and then, of course, budget study with, again, the May 8th adoption of the budget. So that's the kind of quick overview of the process of how we got here. Just a reminder, and this is a very, very high-level reminder of what is in the budget. The recommended budget is $355,400,000. That includes a number of the priorities that were identified through those retreats and briefings as well, and I've just got a few of those noted. As was noted before, the highest amount of funding for the schools that the city has been able to offer, which is an $8.9 million increase year over year. We're now over $101 million in local funding to the schools. It includes completion of the compensation increases for our police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and sheriff's deputies, again with one notation that I've noted before and that you all talked about earlier today, which is the part of that compensation that can't be settled out yet is associated with deputies in the state budget. And so until the state budget gets resolved, we don't know exactly where their compensation will end, although the part that we can do has certainly been completed as well. Also in public safety, it includes the addition of a new medic unit at Station 14 as well, and that includes 6 paramedics and ambulance, and then replacement of a number of emergency vehicles. The other priority, of course, was employee compensation, and over $9 million is being provided in the proposed budget for compensation increases across the organization, as well as $5 million in pension fund increases, as well as, though there are increases in health insurance and others, none of those are being passed forward to the employees. The priorities also include over $50 million in capital. This, of course, includes bridges, paving, sidewalk, stormwater, recreation, vehicles, and technology, among others. And then our other priority, of course, was simply dealing with the inflation and contractual cost increases that all are dealing with across the way. So that is, again, very high level, just a reminder of kind of where we are with it. So I'm going to back up to this slide again, and we're prepared to talk about any of the items that you see bulleted on here. They're actually in the information that you have provided. I guess I want to stop here, and again, in the interest of time, find out, and I'll ask this in the other way, I guess, which is, if there are any of these items that you wish to not discuss, we've just captured everything that kind of came up in the public hearing and stuff as well. But I know each of these will require some conversation if you want to do so. We can cover them all if you want to as well, so.
All right, Vivian?
Sure, if that's what you would like to do, so, yeah, okay. All right, no problem. We will do that, and we will try to be as expeditious, and I will rely on the mayor to make sure that your conversations are as expeditious as they can be as well as we work through
He's
here,
got the
so. And they are going to be presented in that order, so I'm going to start with the first item. This is an item that actually the council raised at the delivery of the budget. I'm going to make one giant notation here, which is in the information that you have and the information that you see on the slide at the bottom where it says fiscal impact, strike that, because that is what happens when the city manager does math. Those numbers are not accurate, so please disregard to those numbers. And the reason they're not accurate is because the impact is cumulative. This is a freeze that is in place, and so what is lost in revenue is as the value of the homes increase, so then does the benefit. Of course, we have no idea how that will increase year over year. So again, strike that piece. Everything else is valid, and they're just disregard that part of it. So the question actually that came up from council was whether there was a desire to revise the elderly and disabled tax freeze threshold. So before I proceed in the rest of it, I'll remind everyone that the council actually has established over the years a number of exemptions as well as tax relief options. Those range from these that we'll talk about, elderly and disabled, to include veterans, which is a complete exemption. So if you're a veteran in our community, you are exempt from real estate taxes. It doesn't freeze, you're exempt from those, and that's one of our larger ones. But it also includes relief for folks that are actually installing energy efficiencies, solar, those types of things on their property. Probably the largest one is actually associated with redevelopment, restoration of homes as well as large commercial buildings. So obviously you all know someone does work, for example, on one of our historic structures in downtown, and it meets a certain criteria and certain threshold, they may receive 5 to 7 years worth of tax relief associated with that. Homeowners have that same opportunity. So all of those are opportunities that exist. The one that you asked us to kind of take a look at is this elderly and disabled tax freeze. So the way it is structured currently is that any elderly homeowner that is at least 65 years of age, or any disabled homeowner that has a total and permanent disability and less than 65 years of age qualify for what I'm about to mention. So if they meet those criteria, then and their annual combined gross income of the residents of the dwelling not exceed $42,000, not including the first $4,000 of gross income of residents other than the owner and the spouse, and not including up to $7,500 in disability income received by permanently disabled applicants, and the combined net worth of the residents of the dwelling unit not exceed $160,000, not including the value of the home. So those, and I've got highlighted in red kind of the two ends of that threshold that really matter, which is the $42,000 and the $160,000. Those have been in place for quite some time. Couldn't honestly tell you how they were established. I'd like to believe at the time there was some rationale for how they were established, but I don't know, it precedes me, so not certain. I think it was reported when we talked about this at the budget meeting that essentially every community surrounding us and elsewhere in the Commonwealth that offers this uses different numbers. And in some cases that makes sense, and in other cases I suspect it's just more random than that. So for example, the threshold is set much higher in Roanoke County, and one of the reasons for that is Roanoke County is a wealthier community. So their median income, so half of the folks in the county that make above or less than that number, is significantly higher than our median income. And so that's why their numbers will differ, for example, than ours. But so does Salem. Their number differs fairly significantly, and again, all of the others. And this is, these thresholds are options that you have control over locally. This is not something that necessarily requires any additional action by the state as well. The graph that we have below that shows what the current impact of that is. So, and again, this is just this form of relief, doesn't count the other forms of relief that I mentioned as well. But currently, the elderly tax freeze removes about $15.8 million from the tax values, if you will, that we collect taxes on. And that has the result of about $200,000 of actual revenue not being available as a result of that freeze. As mentioned, those that are in that freeze, that are eligible for that freeze and are in that program, that number, of course, will go up. Even if we didn't increase any more people in it, that number will go up each year because values presumably are going up on those homes, and it's frozen, so they're not paying on that additional increase in value. When you add in the disabled tax freeze piece of it, it adds about another $100,000 of revenue that is removed as a result of those. So that gives you a sense right now of what the benefit is that's associated with those relief items. One of the items that we looked at, and it's what's listed below as a consideration for revised thresholds, are that you could look at moving the annual combined gross income from $42,000 to $48,350. The $48,350 number is the 80% HUD AMI number. So basically 80% of our area median income. That's the number that is used, for example, in our Healthy Homes initiative that we have here. You have to meet that criteria to qualify for that. It's the first number that HUD recognizes as someone that is of low income. And then that number gets lower and lower, obviously, as you get deeper and deeper into that piece of it. Doesn't seem to be much impact associated with the combined net worth piece of it because, again, since it excludes your principal residence, very few people are going to actually probably reach that number that are actually at this particular income with it. And the last thing I'll say on this is, and then open up for any questions that you might have. And that number could be other numbers too. We're just, that's a number that is tied to something that seems to make some logic and some sense. The revised thresholds would be effective really for the preparation of the FY25 budget, as we mentioned. This is a condition that needs to be present at December of 31 of each year, so that's kind of the starting point associated with it. And applications actually have to be made for participants in this program, and the window for applications are open in April 1 and May 31 of each year. So that will be something that'll have to get factored in if approved with the next budget as it's prepared. Don't know, the one part of the sentence that's true on the bottom is the fiscal impact is unknown because we really don't know how many folks will fall into this category, as well as we don't know how many folks will actually apply for that provision as well. So that would be a calculation we would start learning about as we prepare for the FY25 budget. But again, the graph up above gives you some sense of the magnitude of the folks that are able to participate currently. Obviously, it would increase. We just don't know how much it would increase at this point. So I'll stop there and answer any questions that anyone might have.
Bob, who does we send people to that want to get that information?
So this information is all available on the, both, I think, a link off the Commissioner of Revenue's page and in our real estate valuation offices.
But they want a person to come down and
Yeah,
talk.
so they could talk to somebody in real estate valuation
In real estate
and would assist them,
valuation,
yes. Yep. And there is an actual application that's completed for that. Because again, use the disabled one, for example. You have to demonstrate that you are, as it says, total and permanently disabled in order to qualify for the program. That's the way the state law is written with that, so.
I just have one quick question, Mr. Cowell. The veteran, do they fall into the same category with the thresholds?
No, there are no thresholds. So
For the veteran.
once you demonstrate you are a veteran in the state of Virginia, then you are qualified for the exemption. And that is regardless of, that is regardless of income, that is regardless of value of home.
Because it never occurred to me, I don't know.
And I'll give you, and I don't know this exact number, I had it before, but I don't know. So if you look at, for example, if you look at the freeze and the reduction of the lowering for 65, and I said it took like $15 million off of the tax rolls, if you will, that number somewhere around $31 million is taken off of the tax rolls as a result of the veteran exemption.
Okay, well, we don't have two applications sitting right here.
It's one of you have the option.
That has a major impact across the state and varying on how many veterans you have in your locality. We had different localities last year asking for general funds from the Commonwealth to help replace that because they put the exemption in place.
Yes, and remember, this is a case where the General Assembly put into place this exemption, and the exemption completely benefits and impacts the localities. It has no bearing on the other. This is the 38 million, so, yeah.
Just
Yeah,
one
so it
other
has
question.
almost $500,000 is actually removed from our revenue as a result of that particular exemption.
So I'm just going back to the fiscal impact is unknown. What would you use in order to even get some general idea? Or we just don't have?
We just don't
Until
know.
we get
Yeah.
some applications?
Till we get the applications, we really won't know. I mean, that's why I included that graphic, just to give you a sense of the magnitude that it is today.
Yeah, almost a million if it triples.
Yeah.
And beyond.
Well, but remember, ignore my numbers, because this is a freeze, so incrementally, when you look at this $300,000 impact that's here right now, it took years to get to that point, because remember, they freeze, so they're still paying taxes. And then if their taxes went up $400, then it's that $400 that they're saving. Then the next year, that might be $800, the next year, and so on. So it will incrementally increase with time, just as these have. But it won't automatically result in a significant reduction in revenue. It'll build up over time.
Okay. Thank you.
And go ahead, sorry.
Does this just apply, this freeze, does this just apply to real estate, or is there a provision?
This is
in-
only for real estate, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there is no provision associated with anything other than real estate. The other tax relief that has been afforded through the state on, say, for example, personal property comes through the Personal Property Tax Relief Act, which is, you all vote on that. We get about $8 million a year that we spread among the holders of personal property for that reduction. And I guess really at this point, for this purpose, there's no action required because it would affect next year, other than it would be good to know if there is indeed a consensus from council to move in this direction. That will give us some direction for the upcoming year, and also to get real estate and the Commissioner of Revenue's office and stuff ready to be able to handle additional applications.
Do we need to move that or anything to move it forward, or?
I certainly be content with a consensus from the group.
I just want to thank the manager for bringing this forward. As I had mentioned, and I believe my colleague, Mr. Volasan, also brought that up, was that we were interested in this tax freeze. So I just want to thank you for bringing that forward, and I do hope you have consensus from the council to see how many more elderly and disabled can take advantage of this tax freeze, to give some kind of relief for them.
Even if they're on council.
Even if they own council, 65, you know.
Well, you gotta meet the income threreshold
You gotta,
still.
oh,
So.
going, I just want to meet the
It's
age.
coming close, touch and go now.
Close, yeah, just age.
I certainly concur. I'm also interested in this, meeting the HUD, AMI.
Yeah, and we will explore two options that one thing I'll say for sure, obviously, if, HUD updates those numbers annually, so if that number changes, we would just replicate that number with it. The other thing, we'll talk with the city attorney's office as well, is to see if there's a way in which we can actually peg this actually with that 8% AMI, rather than seeing it kind of age with time, so that you might be able to set it up to say it runs with that 8% number. So that's
That would
another
be
option
good.
we would have, so.
Thank you.
And yes, real quickly, we can.
Okay, very nice.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all. Sounds like we're good to move with that one and stuff, so I appreciate it. You'll obviously have more opportunity to take action on that formally as we go forward, so it's a year off, but we want to get started with it, so, thank you. The next item, that was the one item that we had that came out of the council discussion, either that we've had individually or here at the dais as well. So these items I'm now transferring to are items that came up in the public hearing that we wanted to mention. So, they're in no magical order. We've just sort of selected them as we work our way through. One of those is Edinburgh. You've heard pretty consistently, and I'm sure you'll hear probably again this afternoon, as well, that there are ongoing concerns regarding illegal and insufficient parking concerns. I've included on the graphic just sort of both the Google kind of street, or the aerial view from Google and others, to kind of give you some orientation. I think most of you are familiar with it. The street is kind of a short stub street. It's a public street that comes off of Franklin Road that ends, just kind of dead ends at the park as well. This is a street view of it. Two things I want to note on this is the image that's on the top left. If you look to the right, those parking spaces, there's about 37 of them, I think. Those are all public parking spaces. Probably when this picture is taken, the majority of those folks are probably customers or tenants in that commercial building. So I want to note that That hasn't come up in the discussions, interestingly, when they've come and talked about that they use this parking for their business as well, which they can, just like you have with downtown parking as well. Difference is downtown parking is timed and charged in some instances for parking. The other image that I would point your attention to is down at the bottom on the right is, and you can see it kind of on the very edge, the no parking sign. And the reason I say the illegal parking is because every picture that has been brought in here actually is showing you arguably exactly what they're saying, which is an unsafe condition, and that's the reason that side of the road is actually signed for no parking. All of those vehicles that park on the other side of the road are, again, parking illegally because it is not safe, actually, to line the street on both sides with vehicles. So that's kind of the existing sort of condition, if you will. Yes, yes. Oh, sorry, Peter.
One of the questions I have.
It's weird having y'all.
Yeah. A question I have is there's parking on Wiley Drive.
Yes.
That parking is timed. Is that correct? There should be like an hour or two, no?
I don't think Wiley Drive is timed. That's a good question, but I don't think it is.
Maybe that's, I think that might be one way of dealing with this, because
Yeah.
this is technically, I think, it's close to one of our downtown, zones or whatever we call them, but, if these folks are timed, because most people are coming in for a game or something like that, where, mostly 2 hours is going to do it for them.
Yeah. We'll look at that to see if it is. I'm not thinking it is, but if it is, we certainly can take a look at that.
Okay.
Reserve is a little bit different because Reserve actually gets parked by a lot of the Carillion folks. Even though they have a garage, it's more convenient for them to park on that street. So often during the day at least, parking either here because of customers or over on Reserve are being taken up by people who are not using the fields at all. They're actually using the adjacent businesses in that area. However, none of that matters when it's full of athletes. I mean, when it's full of athletes, there's not adequate parking stuff as well. So, yes, sir.
You go first.
My question is, you said it's not safe.
Correct.
Why? I mean,
It is not safe because actually it's too narrow in order to actually have vehicles parked on both sides of the street, to be able to get emergency vehicles down that street so the fire truck had to drive down. Or, as you've heard them say, since there's no way to turn around, people are having to back up down that street. So that, and I don't know when it was signed for no parking. It's probably been that way for years with it as well. Remember, at one time, there was actually, where you see that building kind of on the bottom right, there was a large, private, but large parking lot there. And that parking lot, of course, is no longer there because thankfully there's a building there now as well. Yes, sir.
Got Parks and Rec questions for you. So was this in any previously submitted CIP request? Is it in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan in
It
any
is
way?
not.
Yeah, okay, have they already covered all of the parking lots that are already in the master plan?
They have not. You mean upgrades, improvements? No.
Yeah,
No.
because I know there's some listed there.
Yes, there are trailheads and other parking lots, yeah.
Well, so I do want to note, I mean, this is important and clearly a coordinated effort. I mean, a third of the public comments at the public hearing and some other comments we got before were focused precisely on this parking lot. I would hope that this could just get further consideration in the future. I mean, it is a large amount of money that didn't actually go through the CIP process. It hasn't been before the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. I'd hope to get some recommendation from them. And I think there are a lot of other alternatives that we might want to consider, even for future submission for CIP. I mean, there are other properties nearby that aren't already on parkland. There's this, what does it call itself, Greenway Park or something,
Yeah.
that is across the street. There's the location behind the Ramada where you'd be able to take the Greenway up and then access so much of that right there, at least park-wise, separate from those businesses. But I think it's a substantial amount of funds to consider in a budget that's about to be adopted for a project that has not come before us before. I understand it's gone through some departments and gotten some preliminary type approvals, but I would hope it could potentially be for a future budget after further development and consideration of other options.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the approvals that have been referred to by the departments mean that it could fit.
Yeah.
Engineering-wise, it works, it could fit, and there have been other buckets of money, if you will, that have been approved, that have been looked at. For example, instead of putting streetscape in a location, use it here. Instead of building we had money, we were resurfacing other parking lots for, do that, and it was my determination at that point that that was not appropriate, that those other projects actually rank in more importance and higher. But that's one of the reasons why we're bringing it to you all, because it certainly, as you've heard, remains a challenge and also remains something of concern. So, yes, ma'am.
Mr. Cowell, providing the additional 18 spaces, is that going to be enough to suffice
And that's a
the
perfect,
cost?
that's a perfect segue into this slide. So, no, I mean, currently there are 37 parking spaces, which again, during evening or weekends is probably completely available for users of the field. During the day, otherwise not, because again, there are customers that are using it as they should be. So adding 18 more spaces, certainly as has been mentioned, would be 50% more than what is currently out there. But when you saw those images, will not come anywhere near actually addressing the issue. So even if we do find a way in which to accommodate those 18 spaces, it is my opinion that there needs to still be looking at enforcement, because we would still have parts out there that are not appropriate for parking, and we would have to increase enforcement in that area. Also, to Mr. Pretty's point, we may need to look at other parking arrangements as well, whether that be with Dr. Clements with the lot across the street, whether that be with Sonny Shaw and the lot that's paved that's back behind where the Ramada is, neither of which are under our control currently, and I doubt either of which would be made at no cost to us, but certainly those alone would not solve. It would help, but it would not solve the issue, which is part of what went into my calculations when I had to evaluate it against other projects that were already funded, where I do know that paving a gravel parking lot that we might have right now, or a falling apart parking lot, really did make a difference in this piece. It would not fully resolve the issue.
Well, because I'm almost finished. So with that being said, I heard, I don't know, Mr. Pretty referred to it had not come, this request had not come before us in the form of CIP request, but based on the letter that we got, they had asked for.
The adjacent property owners and others have repeatedly requested.
So they have requested it.
Correct. We have not included it.
We're just not including it.
So as we go through our CIP process, of course, we look to those master plans that have been approved through a public process. We look at the needs that have been identified by the departments, and then we evaluate against the money that we've had, and we've not brought that forward. And that's why if you look kind of on this slide, I mean, the way in which we would include it into the CIP would require us to do a few things. We would, one, we would have to look at, is there a currently funded parks project, for example, that we would replace with this? That would be one item that we would look at. And two of those that are in the CIP for this year are Richardson Whalen, the building, and the skate park. Those are two examples with that. We would also look at current or future capital project contingency. So if for some reason our capital projects, which are currently costing us more, but because of inflation, but if they cost us less and there were proceeds left from it, we could potentially use that source of money. And then also this year, we could have some year-end funding that's not yet allocated, and we could certainly look at that as a source of funding.
So it hasn't
as
been
well.
funded before because it's been cost prohibitive, or we just not?
Just in terms of priorities, the other items that are in the CIP have.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cowell, would it make more sense for us to do a parking study of that area as we continue to see more of Carilion, the Fralin Biomedical Institute? You're seeing more people using that area in general. Would there be I think that might be a better plan, is maybe this is a temporary thing that if we can do with contingency funds, we do it. But I don't think that 18 slots is going to fix the real problem down there, which is we have a lot of people working in that area now too.
Yeah, and you may therefore we may need to manage parking down there. I mean, right now, we basically don't manage parking like you would in downtown or in Grandin or other areas where we have timed parking, where we have enforcement, where Park Roanoke actually is involved in that regard. You may need to do that. I mean, it may be necessary to, for example, compel those that are working at Carilion to park on Carilion property rather than on reserve. It may be, others. But yeah, we certainly could do that regardless of whether we proceed with this or not. We could look at the overall, because it also may, I know that this idea was met with a bit of disdain by the folks that were here talking, but, I also don't know that it's reasonable for us just to assume that the fields can be fully used under any circumstances without consideration of, is there an adequate ability to park whatever's going on there? We do that with, for example, certain events are required to have restroom facilities actually brought on site because we know there's going to be enough people there that we need to accommodate that. It may be necessary for us to look at how many activities can this park handle at one time, given the available parking as well, as we go through. I mean, I just think we do that with events in downtown, we do that with events in neighborhoods, where we have to take that into consideration. But, that would all be true, I think, whether this is here or not.
My question is, how many parking slots would you have if you paved that gravel parking space that they were talking about the other day?
Well, we can't pave, so there was reference to the Ramada, where we tore down the Ramada. And that property, remember, we acquired that property because of its placement in the floodway. And so there are restrictions on what we can do with that. And I don't know this for certain, but I'm fairly certain that paving it would not be an option. Could you do it with pervious pavers? Possibly. But then you have to build the stormwater system that actually is going to manage that, because that lets the water go through and has to be managed as it goes. It would make more sense, I think, at least temporarily, try to figure out a way to use the paved parking that is behind it, which is part of the office building that is behind that Mr. Shaw owns as well. But and the same would be true too if Dr. Clements, which he has offered, the option of talking with him about use of that property. Again, I presume for a cost. That would have to be paved as well. We can't, our ordinances don't permit us to actually park on grass or establish a gravel lot with it, so.
What about more modern types of where you have permeable surfaces that are either grass grows through them?
Right, and that would be
Yeah.
like the permeable pavers
Yeah.
with it and stuff. And that might be possible on that location. There would be a cost, obviously, associated with it. And we would have in that case, to review against our FEMA limitations on the property because, again, of how we acquired it.
Yeah.
But that certainly could be, again, it's not without cost. And of course, it's a much larger area. There have been, if you remember, we've been going through about a year-long process with the community of what to use that property for. Most of the responses have been around natural activities, but some have been around trailhead parking or what have you and stuff. So.
Bob, Luke and I have to leave to go over to court for Law Day. I got some other questions now. Hoping we'll be back before we go into closed session.
Sure.
But I'm turning it over to the Vice Mayor to figure everything out.
Figure it out.
I do have
Yes, ma'am.
a question, Bob. It's more of a comment, I think, with regards to the 18 spaces and all. But because of where River's Edge is and when the city put it there, and what we've been doing of late over the years, again, history with River's Edge with grandkids and children, and parking, as they said, on Edinburgh and parking anywhere you could, across the street at the Ramada Inn, I'm confessing, parking over at Victory Stadium and all. But now with the Greenway being in place, the spaces are being more valuable now. And with that said, because of what the city put in place to encourage the use of River's Edge, for sports, and also encouraging the walkers on the Greenway, I do think perhaps we do need to look at a study, as it has been mentioned, to see how we can manage the parking, to see if we can partner with others, and also taking into consideration those who have mentioned the 18 spaces, and if it's not durable, make it plain, make it clear why it's not. And like you said, if it's a safety feature for public safety reasons, then let's put that out there, than just to say no.
Yeah.
I think just saying no doesn't fit.
And
but
just to be clear,
doing more,
the 18
yeah.
spaces could be done safely.
Right.
So
Well,
because
yeah.
they would be actually a parking lot
Okay.
with it and stuff. So those could be done safely, most definitely. It's parking along the existing street
Right,
that's not safe.
right.
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
we can, to look at that
Sure.
and bring that back sooner than later, and
Yeah.
just pushing it out and just not taking in,
Yeah.
but they took the time to come and express their views
Sure,
on
and
that.
River's Edge, partly because of those changes, that
Mm-hmm.
there was a new parking lot built on, that accesses off a reserve, so that you go to help serve that area
Mm-hmm.
because of that growth. But there's no question, there are multiple times with River's Edge and its usage, that it exceeds what the
does.
parking is that's in that area.
Yeah,
As you
even
said,
to the
for that-
back, where we're parked, where the tunnel is at, all
Yeah.
the way down into Carillion space, over there on McClellan. We're parked in the bank parking lots. They've
Yep.
done it all.
Yeah,
yes.
most definitely. So,
Yes.
I mean, my suggestion would be, with this is that we not take off the table the idea of building this, this facility. I think from the reaction I saw, I think that it's safe to say we would not want to take something out of the current CIP to actually fund it, that if funding were possible, it would be through one of those contingencies, either year-end or inside the next year, but that be accompanied by a more comprehensive assessment of what the parking needs are for that area. And I guess I'd add one more thing, which is I would recommend that we not take action on constructing anything till we've actually completed that parking assessment. And we won't, it's not something we should take long to do. It's something we want to move quickly on so that we know what is the best solution here to address
And
that.
mentioning that, and you mentioned you said, when you mentioned the capital project contingencies, is there also in your purview to view what the city manager's contingency, which is
Could be as well.
1.5, to bring that in?
Correct. Any of the contingencies that we
Okay.
have could be
Okay.
made available.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Final notes to make on the object on one point of the consensus. I would support that if, I know this hasn't gone to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, if they support that end on a recommendation, then I would support that at least as an individual of council, and I don't know what
Yeah.
other views are, because I think a more collective study is more appropriate rather than rushing forward with this parking lot while something does need to
And I
be
would,
done.
yes, I would add to my recommendations just that I think we need to be, this parking study, since it relates directly to a park and the use of the park, and again, even whatever parking we provide is still going to require some other activities, it has to be coordinated with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
And then
agree with that.
make two closing thoughts so I can leave. Postpone parking, ask the board, fund trees, maintenance, please. We have lots of trees, we need to maintain them. And transit, I know there are lots of requests. Hopefully something can be found this year. I feel like that is still going to be like some of our other items. Longer-term discussions are going to need to be had about all of that. And I'll see you all later.
Thank you.
Bob, I just had.
Yes.
Just two quick things on this. What I have not been able to tell from what's been presented is, and maybe it's been presented and I just haven't heard it, is how long this issue has been. Is this like a brand-new issue? Is this something that's been building over the course of the last year in terms of increased activity? Is it seasonal based on recreation activity? I am concerned about the safety piece of it, and I do wonder if stepping up a way to manage the parking there would be helpful. I know there's a cost related with that because you have staff involved, but I think that's worth consideration until we get to that place where there are more available spaces.
Yeah, I think the short answer to the first part is all of the above. I think this is a combination of, previously when Graves Humphrey building was there was nobody around there to actually see or be concerned. And there was a very large parking lot that, though private, I'm certain people were parking on. With the redevelopment of this property, I think now there are more people using it and more people aware of how it's being used, so that's certainly a piece of it. Thankfully, with River's Edge, we're getting more and more activity and more success with it, so that certainly has increased that as well. Perfect example of it was the last time they were here, they showed you a picture of what it looked like on that Sunday. Well, that Sunday happened to be when the slow 5K was running, so that's an example of a very large event that filled up parking everywhere in that area. So I think it's a combination of all of those as it works through. Somewhere in the middle of this discussion over the last year or so, one of the discussions I did have with them was that we probably needed to take some action to start parking enforcement in that area. That was not necessarily strongly supported because, as you heard some of them at the podium, they didn't want to discourage the use of the parks, but it will be a part of this equation no matter what. And most likely Park Roanoke would actually be the entity that we would use to actually do enforcement, not police, because we simply don't want to pull those resources off. We would use Park Roanoke, which would be fine. It would require some weekend activities that we don't currently have, but.
And I wasn't so much concerned about on the enforcement side as I was just instructing people about other options for parking
Yeah.
so that it keeps that safety corridor
Yeah, the challenge in that
open there.
location is it's the most convenient.
It is, sure.
So I mean, it really
Okay.
will be, even if we had, use Ramada as an example, even if that was all available,
Yeah.
this will fill up first.
Yeah,
And
sure.
will still be that. So that's why I say it really needs to be part of a comprehensive solution, one that doesn't take 2 years to come up with. I think we can
Right.
come up with something that we can figure out what to do with it.
The other piece of it, which ties into the assessment, is I was wondering if there are other areas near parks, near fields, where this is a growing issue, and if we could include those, if there are any, if we could include those in this assessment, so that we're not just doing a one-off thing, but we're.
Yeah, I can find out. I'm not
Comprehensively.
aware of anything, but I can certainly ask around. I mean, again, the good part of it is as our parks get more and more use, this hopefully will become somewhat of a challenge that we need to manage and work with. But I'm not aware, but we'll certainly,
Yeah, I think
Explore those.
Eureka may be one.
that would be the closest one, especially
Yes.
during events, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's why there's some additional parking proposed in the redevelopment of
Yeah,
it is for
that's
that.
good.
And certainly as it grows, you're going to see more use there as well. That's also another reason why we've tried to locate as many of these facilities in and around neighborhoods as possible, so that folks don't have to drive to these locations, that they can actually get on the greenway and go, or they can walk from their neighborhood into these areas. So, okay, thank you. The next item we had from the public hearing included the urban forestry staffing. So some background here first, then I'll kind of jump into this. So over the last several years, as you all probably know all too well, there have been consistent requests for additional dollars for tree planting. That has resulted over the years in an increase in the base budget of about $72,000 above what we had before. And on the ARPA funding, you all approved $250,000 going to that, specifically oriented around the heat island
Okay,
mitigation.
good.
So it is based off of that effort that was done with Virginia Tech, and that's where the plantings will occur over the next 2 to 3 years, some of which will take place in parks, some on street right-of-way, and some in private lots, is how the program will be structured. Each tree costs between $200 and $400. That's with the installation of the tree as well as the tree. So the objective is to plant as many as 300 trees each year, no less than 150 for those. There has also been an increase in staff over the years for these activities, and that's noted below. So for the urban forestry program overall, there's about $700,000 that goes toward that, much of which obviously goes to staff, but not all. Currently, there are 11 approved FTEs, and it's got the breakdown below, which 6 of those are tree trimmers, 3 of them are maintenance technicians, and then a supervisor and a coordinator. There are currently 3 vacancies in that position, and that is significant as we move into this, to the rest of this discussion, so I want to kind of hold that piece. The other piece that is significant is what I've just shared with you is the increase in the base budget over the years to plant more trees and include more people in taking care of those. The request that we processed was for more. It was for addition, so it doesn't affect that base that I just mentioned. This was to add some additional resources into that. The request, of course, was for 2 additional tree care specialists. The budget that I brought forward to you all includes 1 additional tree care specialist with that. And again, one of the factors that went into that was the current vacancy rate. One of the things I try to do as much as we can is to not create additional new positions where there are vacancies, because those dollars then cannot be used for other purposes. We did feel, though, that that it was justified to add an additional, because it is important to make sure that these trees do remain healthy as we work through. So our recommendation continues to be the same, that we fund the single position. Doesn't mean that it won't be reevaluated again with the FY25 budget. If there was a desire to not do that, I've listed below the currently approved FTE increases in the organization, and most likely we would replace one of those. But again, at this point, our recommendation is that we have the single position.
So you're still saying just 1?
Just the
Correct.
additional
Correct.
1 tree care specialist.
So you
instead of
don't think
2.
Correct.
with all the trees that are going to be planted, do you think one person, with one person and their staff, I guess?
Yes, I think one additional will be sufficient, at least initially, because remember, we're starting to plant these.
Right.
But the caveat to that is if those vacant positions get filled as well. 1 position, 2 positions actually wouldn't help at all if they remain vacant. So the key is going to be filling those
Fill in
vacant
the vacant
positions.
ones.
And then
With
adding.
Adding the 1.
With the
adding those
3,
trees.
which would make it 4 plus the 11, Is
That is correct.
Okay.
Well, the three are in the 3 vacant are in that 11.
Oh, it
positions.
is,
So-
okay.
So it's a total of
So it's
11.
a total of
Yes,
11.
if we added one
Plus
more-
one would be 12.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, yep. So that's that item where we are.
Okay, yeah, so that makes more sense now.
Bob, where are the vacancies currently in those?
I believe they are actually in the tree trimmers, but I'm not sure. I'm looking back like somebody knows back there.
That's what
Michael, do you know?
That's what I was assuming.
There's one crew leader position open and one tree trimmer. We made an offer on one tree trimmer, so.
Hopefully out of our job fair, right?
I hope
So
Thank
it is part of the urban staffing, okay.
Yeah, they're definitely in urban forestry. I just
Okay,
didn't know which
that's
one of
what I
those
want,
was.
okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
All right, the next item is, you heard from, you've heard consistently from folks regarding an increase in transit service. You all know that, again, as part of the ARPA funding that you approved, one of the requests we made was for a dedicated amount of money that would go to GRTC and Valley Metro that would be used for really two things. One of those is what's being referred to as MetroFlex, which is essentially later hour service and weekend service where there is not any. It would not be done through fixed route, so it would not be taking all of our existing buses and expanding that. Instead, it would be done kind of as a hybrid sort of approach where it's some fixed and some on-call kind of work. And the idea is that would be done as a pilot to demonstrate that it's being used with the intent that we would then secure more permanent funding through DRPT and others, through the FTA and DRPT. That was about a year ago that we had that conversation, as was mentioned at the podium. I know that conversation was had at the GRTC meeting as well. And at this point, what we're waiting for is for Valley Metro to proceed with I mentioned two things. I mentioned MetroFlex, and I failed to mention the other one, which is the expansion of the shelter program, as well as, where possible, sidewalks getting to those shelters. So those are the two components of that. At this point, it is in the hands of Valley Metro. My understanding is that an RFP is to be issued this Friday on that. That RFP is for the MetroFlex piece of it. So what they'll have to do is actually issuing an RFP for someone to actually bid on that service and providing that service. And then we'll enter into, ultimately GRTC would enter into a contract with them to do so. That would run the length of the ARPA funding. So we have that funding through till the end of '24 is what that timing would. And again, the intent is enough of that to demonstrate that there is ridership associated with it. The sidewalks and shelter projects would be done basically on a case-by-case basis. They've been doing those over the last several years. The idea of generating additional money is to allow more of those to be done and stuff as well. And I know we've asked Kevin Price to be here, the general manager, should you have any specific questions about those, because that kind of exhausts my knowledge of kind of where things are with
I
it.
do have a question with your MetroFlex. I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear and the public understands, because I don't. Is this to extend the service out that the ladies have been coming talking about?
Yes, not physically. So
Okay.
we're not going beyond the boundaries that we currently have within
Okay.
our system. That would require participation from other jurisdictions.
Right, I'm not going outside.
Right, but it
just
would
within
extend the
city.
hours,
Okay.
correct. Yes, it would
Extend
not
it.
extend the hours on every single route. It would
Right.
extend the hours that we offer service, and it would extend the days in which we offer service and stuff
Okay.
as well. And Kevin can give a better answer to that probably
Okay,
than I
and
can as well.
that's where I'm at, is just
Yeah.
showing, letting the public know
Yeah.
what hours and where,
Yeah.
and the days, that sort of thing, I think would be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
If
And
I
that was somewhat shared with GRTC when we first.
Yes.
Kevin, you
Let
want
Kevin come
I
up
know
and speak to
we
it.
heard something a little bit about they doing one of the council meetings, but,
It was a year ago, so.
right, it's been that long, yeah.
Thank you. MetroFlex is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, it's called microtransit.
Okay,
Bob talked about not all routes, but the MetroFlex will cover all routes.
okay,
So one would need to call 24 hours in advance, conceptually, 24 hours in advance to get a ride for the next day. And over time, this system would establish what we have now. It's called fixed route system. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to build it according to the need for the passengers, because we want it to be successful. And so the concept of microtransit allows us to do that. I'm sure you've heard the terms before, using a smaller bus or using limited, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, we'll use smaller vehicles to do this, so it's more agile. It can go different places. And it will grow as the ridership need grows. And so it's
Is
sustainable.
this something, when you say they have to call
Yeah.
within 24 hours to get the ride, similar to radar?
Similar to radar,
Okay.
yes, ma'am. It's more, the term
It's
flex.
flexible, but
It's
I mean,
flexible,
yeah.
but it still provides some sort of door-to-door service.
Okay.
But I don't say it's my problem, but my concern is it's gonna be very popular. It's gonna be very successful. And we'll need to be agile enough to grow it, and be agile enough to move it quickly. to
And it would be
accommodate folks.
within, let's say, I called and I needed a ride by 9, and someone else called and needed one by 9:30. So you would pick us up almost on the same schedule
Yes,
to
ma'am.
get us to where we would need to be. Some may be earlier to
Right.
meet that than being on time
That's
for
right.
theirs.
The initial concept is to break the city into quadrants,
Yes,
northwest, northeast, as it is today, and have vehicles positioned in each quadrant.
right.
And so when that vehicle needs to move, it will move. Unlike fixed route where it moves irregardless if someone's at the stop or not,
Right.
these vehicles will only move as needed. So
So potentially could save money.
it's an efficient service.
That's right, could cut down on the
With-
transit.
Because you don't know what, you don't know what the ridership's going to be.
Yeah.
And so you want the ridership to drive the service,
Yeah.
and then it'll grow after that.
And what are the hours that would be?
8:45 to 12:45 a.m., and then on Sundays, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m.
12:45 p.m.?
8:45 p.m. to
Oh,
12:45
p.m.,
a.m.
okay, to 8 a.m. Oh, okay, so that's the evening time period they'll be able to use this, not during
Yes,
the
ma'am.
day? Okay.
To, on Sundays, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m.
So the intent is to extend the hours of the
Right.
operation in this way.
And Star passengers will also be able to use the service, so anyone who's on our system now will be able to avail themselves of the service.
Yeah, the one concern that I have is for essential workers and people who work for me, for example, who need transportation on Sundays. That continues to be an issue for us in this industry. I
Right.
was hoping that we would address it in this round, but it doesn't appear that
We
we will.
can address it.
We
We
can.
have, yeah, Sundays 9 to 6.
But,
can address it.
but I'm saying, but on Sunday, did you say?
Yeah,
Sunday.
Sunday,
Okay.
Sunday 9 to 6.
It won't, I mean, it's still limited in.
Yeah, it's just day hours and not night.
Oh, yeah, just day, okay, because I
Yeah,
didn't
no
hear
night
Sunday.
hours.
Okay, so just day hours.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
One thing definitely to note on this, again, is, what we're doing right now is a pilot, because what we've got is money through ARPA to be able to test this. Hopefully, it is as popular as Kevin hopes or fears, whichever one it is. And we're able then to make the case to DRPT and FTA for permanent funding associated with it. So just want
Yeah.
to make sure.
Oh,
that
that's
that's
good.
clear.
Sounds like a good
definitely helps.
program. I would
Yeah,
hope it
that
would
helps.
be. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
market it.
Bob, with our sidewalks, do we have any, are we using shelters or bus stops as any factor in where we're putting our curbs? Was it CSG? Curb, sidewalk, gutter? Is
Yeah,
that
so
taken
if we can combine them, a good example is, though it has taken much longer than any of us had hoped, outside, right across the street and in between the Envision Center and the Housing Authority offices in that area over there, there is actually both a combined sidewalk project, crosswalk, and bus shelter, all going in that area from all different sources of funding, but we're able to coordinate those together. So same was true when we did the streetscape on Melrose. We actually did the combined bus shelters as well as the sidewalk replacement and the curb and gutter piece. So if we're able to coordinate those, we certainly do and will. What we find with sidewalks is in a lot of cases, the place where the bus stop is nowhere near sidewalks. And so making it available is a challenge. So what we're trying to do is figure out a way to at least make it so that folks that are getting on and off the bus aren't standing in mud, if you will, that there's actually something concrete, even if it's not connected to the sidewalk, if it's not able to. And then, of course, we're able to put the shelter, always, as you all know, the limiting factor with the shelter is there has to be enough room for a sidewalk to run in front of or behind the shelter that's ADA accessible in the shelter, which usually means we're securing some kind of easement adjacent to it and stuff. But yeah, we continue to try to coordinate those where we can.
Mr. Cowell, does it make sense to add the shelter that we want and have requested a Valley View into
It-
the budget just
It
in
is,
case?
it is funded.
It is
Yeah.
funded, so I
Funding
just want
is-
to make sure it's funded, because
Yeah.
I think we're
Just
going to have
waiting
to.
on the
No, we're
Yeah.
not going to wait anymore. We're going to just go and protest. We're going to put on our.
That's right, walk around
We're
the
going
ring.
to walk around the perimeter.
Yeah, no,
Walk around it 7 times.
Yeah.
Shout.
Yeah.
Funding has never been an issue with that
Okay,
one,
yeah, I
so
just want
yeah.
to make sure we keep that funding, because we're going to have to put some pressure on them to do
Yeah.
something, because it just,
Something
it's
needs
just,
to be
I just
done.
cannot tolerate
Yeah,
that
no,
anymore.
funding's not a problem.
Yeah.
We can make,
Just-
we can make that one happen. so.
Should
Yeah.
happen.
We
It
need
should
to
happen
make it
soon.
happen.
Yeah, we need to make it happen.
Let's make it happen.
Thank you all for that. So the next item is actually around sort of the youth recreation. This came up from, I think maybe one person, a couple people mentioned this, and I'll start this with just some context first, and this is currently what we're doing associated with the youth program, recreation and youth programming. Thankfully, with your support, as we've gone through the last couple of years, we're actually spending more money now on recreation than we probably ever have in our city's history, predominantly through facilities as we move forward and stuff. So some of those, as a reminder, is we've got the Eureka Recreation Center in design, Washington Park Pool in design. The skate park is in the proposed CIP and would go into design in the upcoming year. Of course, you all know that we've replaced over a dozen playground and athletic courts, and that will still continues through that. Some of that has been funded general fund, some through ARPA, as we've worked our way through that.
Bob, could I
Yes, ma'am.
interrupt you just
Sure.
a moment while we talk about the athletic court replacements? I did speak with you briefly about it. I had received a call, and that's why I'm bringing it up. Just so the person would know I did speak on
Sure.
this. When we talk about athletic courts, I had mentioned to you about the tennis courts, I believe, over at Patrick Henry.
Yes, yes.
And I just want to be, just so they'll know, that is something that the city does not replace. Go ahead,
Correct.
if
The
you could
ones that
just
you had
answer that,
Yeah,
please.
the ones that the council member had mentioned are actually the tennis courts that are on the school property. So those are the school's responsibility to actually maintain those and or replace those as well.
Okay,
So-
thank you for.
Sure,
for
no,
seeing
no
that
problem.
publicly.
We also, as part of the Parks and Recreation by program, is broken out, so there's about $1.8 million that goes into the Parks and Recreation program, and you can see the breakout from outdoor recreation, athletics, events, community recreation, and so on. Obviously, here in the city, we don't respond to youth recreation needs or programming through Parks and Recreation alone. We also use our library system, and you can see that broken out as well through the libraries with it. So that's budget-wise. Some of the things on the next slide that just show you.
May I?
Sure.
Just have a question. With regards to the Eureka Recreation Center.
Yes.
I just need to make sure I understand. We are no longer going to replace this center as originally discussed. It is being,
Sure. So what it'll be is, it will be completely redeveloped, so restored, or
using the actual, the physical building that's there.
Correct.
You're going to use that building.
yeah, so if you think of
Okay.
the shell of the building will be
Uh-huh.
used, all of the heating, cooling, electric, where necessary, will all be replaced. Interior will be completely remodeled in it as
So
well.
it's like gutting it out and
Yeah,
building.
yeah. And then there is an addition, a sizable addition
I was
actually,
gonna
that will be
say,
added
yeah,
to
for
it
13
next.
million.
So
And is that on the back?
no, it'll be on
side or
the,
front side?
if you're looking at it, it'll be on the right side.
Okay.
Is where it will be with it.
Okay.
And that will be the space that houses multi-purpose rooms, the restroom facilities, offices, and a few other things.
And that's moving out past the shelter? If I'm facing it to my right?
To your right, yes.
It would
yes,
take the
yes,
shelter and
going
you
over
would
that
be
direction.
putting in another shelter?
I don't know.
No shelter?
Not as a part of this project, but the site amenities that's in the CIP.
Yeah, so there's another project in the CIP that actually looks at the rest of Eureka Park and looks at adding amenities associated with it, so it would be part of that.
So there won't
discussion.
be any shelters in the park until you all,
That's in the CIP now.
that's what I'm saying,
yeah.
it's I don't know how many years out is what I'm
Yeah, it
looking
would
at.
probably be concurrent with it, I would
I was
think. So
gonna
as we
say,
do the construction on the new Eureka facility, we would add those facilities.
And that's where we'll be doing a study on parking as well, so they're not parking up on the
Yeah,
basketball court.
there's actually additional parking proposed in the
Okay.
plan as well. So,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
okay, thank you.
Sure. So a few other items that are current programs, and again, most of these you know.
Sorry, just one more thing.
Sure.
What is the neighborhood community centers with the library?
I think that's what they're simply referring to as parts of the library. So those are from our programs.
Mhm.
So inside our libraries, that's one of their programs that they do, is actually operate those.
Okay.
That's what I believe they're
And
referring to.
also with regards to the libraries by program, this has nothing to do with the whole of government, is that correct?
That's correct,
This
actually.
is
that'll be-
separate and apart.
Yes, you're correct. Yes, the items that we show on there is not
Okay.
inclusive of that. That's
Okay.
correct. Yep.
Okay.
So
And
we're now getting into
One more thing
that.
before you
Sure.
get to that. With all of this, that you have recreation and youth programming, there is sufficient staff that will cover the recreation programs for outdoor athletics events and
No.
no?
No, there is not.
Oh,
So that
okay.
is, so we still, based off of, a lot of that relies on part-time, seasonal
Okay.
part-time work. And so we are still relying on outsourcing for some of those activities until we can actually secure enough people to actually do that. So after-school and summer programs are good examples of that with it. If we ever get back in a position where there's no cost savings necessarily in doing this, but if we get back to a position where we can actually hire temporary seasonal folks again, then we would bring those back in-house.
Or we're able to cover it with the outsourcing
Correct,
to
correct.
bring
To
it
keep
up
those
to where-
programs going.
To keep those going,
Yes, yes,
okay.
yes. Yeah, and that's why we did that, was so we didn't lose service, as we didn't have those folks available. Actually,
Right.
Michael, 2 years ago, I think, came to us and said, we can't fill these positions, and because we can't fill them, then then those programs were at risk. This allowed us to keep those programs in place.
Okay.
The question you had about the whole of government is actually on this next slide,
Oh,
which is
okay.
the Star City Safe activities. So these are activities that are beyond sort of the activities that I just mentioned, are sort of our normal activities that we're providing for youth. Through our Human Resources Department, we just started the 5th cohort of the Youth Apprentice Program. So these are youth that are referred to us through either Reset or the Police Department or our Youth and Gang Violence Prevention Coordinator, who then enter into a program. It's a paid program, so they're paid to go through training with the city, and these are all teens. And then upon completion of their training, they are then employed by the city for a period of time as well. And again, we just started the 5th cohort.
And what is the ages under this
They
youth apprenticeship?
they will go all the way down, I think we have folks in there as
14?
young as 14, I think.
14.
14, yep.
To
We've had
21?
folks over,
Is it 21?
yeah, 14 to 18.
So it's just 14 to 18?
Yep.
Okay. And these are the at-risk kids who are
Yeah, they were
on their
referred,
way getting into?
yeah, they've been referred to us because of some interaction that they've had with one of our outreach groups and stuff as well.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
And then, of course, we've had, for more than a year now, we've had extended hours at Melrose. And this includes meals, movies, extra programming after hours. You know, those numbers have had upwards of a couple hundred youth that have attended those as well. And that has allowed us on Wednesday nights to keep the library open longer.
And this is the one where they have the two gentlemen who
That's correct.
have the ex-felons who work and have established relationships.
So we have our mentors as well as other outreach workers that are there. You might see Chris there on a regular basis as well, our gang and youth violence coordinator and
Right,
stuff.
and the Reset
Yep.
team is, yes, I visit there, and I have heard great things about.
Yeah, it's a very popular program.
Yes, and that the mentors have developed, and has established rather, some great relationships. Some trust has definitely been created between the youth. I've even had a chance to talk with a couple of them who have said that. In fact, I met one who was part of a shooting and had mentioned the incident and have said that with the help of actually Eddie Watkins, that he feels like he has someone he can talk with when he feels a little anxious in that. And so that
Yeah,
in
it's been
itself tells me if you just reach just one,
Yeah.
to me, that says a lot. So I hope we will be able to keep that in place, working with those type of mentors to work with the youth.
No, it's been a good program, and I should mention, all of these items that we've got on this list currently
Yeah.
are funded through our ARPA funding, and
Yes.
will continue to be so going forward, and then we'll have to decide at that point
Yeah.
how we want to actually continue.
Right,
So,
right.
Well, and Melrose has been a great model, and I think that there might be at least one other, maybe two other libraries that if we could expand this model to those libraries, that would be something to consider in the future.
Yeah, the beauty of,
Definitely.
the one advantage of Melrose, obviously, is the size of the library. Gainsborough, for example, is a very difficult one to do that in because of the size, but there are other options possibly.
Like the main library perhaps.
Yeah, Maine could be, yeah. On the Parks and Recreation side, Michael and his staff were able to offer, you actually heard, I think Darnell Woods was actually one that spoke on this, throughout much of last year's swimming season, we're able to offer periodic free swimming. Those were some of the most popular days at the pool. So we were able to do that. Obviously, we're not going to be doing that this season because of the Washington Park Pool redevelopment. We will be having other activities that have already been programmed. I've provided that information in your updates that will start running in June. So those will run
And that would
concurrent.
run, is it 3 days or 4 days a week?
5 days.
5 days,
Yeah.
okay.
And it'll run basically the same season the pool would have been open. Is
Right,
how that'll be
and the
structured.
hours are just for me.
We're running it in the afternoon, so
After.
that young people attending RCPS Plus.
So is it like after 12?
It is,
Okay. And where are the programs going to be held?
in Upper Washington Park, or about
Oh, outside, okay.
Yes, sir.
With the free swimming, we did that last year. Why are we not?
Because there's no pool.
Well, I mean, we do have Fallon Park.
Fallon, we have Fallon.
Fallon is not under, so we actually contract for
Oh,
Fallon to
that's
be
right,
managed. So we have handed that off to the Gators. So
To
the
the
Gators
Gators, yeah.
actually manage it. And part of the reason they agree to manage it is they receive the funds that are part of the entry on it. And
Is there any kind of partnership perhaps that could be looked at with the Y? If any of the kids wanted to go swimming, could go down here to the
Yeah,
Kirk Y?
there is actually an arrangement with the YMCA through our reset program
okay.
as well. I don't know if it includes both YMCA's. I know it includes the Gainsborough YMCA, so it's the Gainsborough, so that's not the pool.
But they
piece.
don't.
But they don't have access to a pool.
Right, that's not the pool piece,
Yeah.
so, I don't know. I mean, the YMCA was our partner at Washington Park Pool. They operated it for us up until last year, and then we had to take over operation because of the issues that they were having, so we certainly can continue to talk with them.
Yeah,
about
please
that.
do, because it'd be hot and they would still like to
Yeah,
have access to some water.
Yeah, there
Yes.
will be, if I recall correctly, there will be some water-based activities as a part of what
Yeah.
we're doing at Washington Park.
Yeah.
Big
Not
water
swimming,
slides, maybe?
Yeah,
Yes.
large was
Yes.
sliding
Slip
off
and slide.
Yeah.
But at least,
Yeah.
yeah, I think
One
that
step
would be
above that,
something
so.
to look at, if it is possible to offer, some swimming for
Yeah,
them.
and we'll
if they-
certainly
Yeah,
continue
and
to talk with
yeah.
them.
It certainly
To
would.
keep up their skill level if they want to become a lifeguard or something.
Or for those who are wanting, want to learn how to
Yeah,
swim. I don't
yeah.
think it would be that many, because then there would be
Yeah.
transportation issues, but for those who could,
Yeah.
it would certainly be a good idea.
And I
to-
think transportation could probably be worked out. I
Yeah.
think they'll be able to find a way if it's
they-
made
if they-
available,
We also, as a part of that project, or program, we also extended the hours for the open gym at Eureka. So we had kind of, just like we did the libraries, we had
good.
extended hours there for youth to be able to play in
That's good.
in the gym. And then in partnership, we've already talked about some of these, in partnership with RPD, which includes the reset program and others. We've got in place a boxing program, counseling, mentoring, recreation and enrichment activities at the YMCA, hikes and so on. So all of those are associated with Star City Safe.
And what is the boxing program?
That's the
What-
Box Fit program. So,
okay.
and they've been doing that, originally they were doing that at the Gainsborough YMCA. I think they're now doing it a combination of there, and then, of course, the facility at Norwich.
Have we
as
tried
well.
to also bring that in with the Melrose Athletic Club, since they offer boxing as well?
If they want to contract with
That's
them,
what
they
I-
certainly could and
Okay.
stuff, yeah.
Have we reached out to offer that?
I don't know, because that's been handled through the police and stuff, so I'm not
Okay,
sure, so, yeah.
Okay, if you could please
Sure.
check on, where I don't want to step on no toes.
Sure.
All right.
So that brings, all that was just to set the stage of what we are doing, and it brings us forward to what you heard, I think, in some of the conversation with the public, at the public hearing. One of those was dealing with Eureka, the Eureka Recreation Center. So there obviously was a request for staffing. Obviously, we're not moving that forward because the facility is in design now and still is over a year away from being completed. We will have to revisit that, of course, at the FY25 budget, just as we are adding footprint to this, so it is certainly expected that we'll have to have more employees at that facility in order to offer the services. So not this year, because there's no facility, but next year we will need to be looking at that as well. Washington Park pool staffing is kind of the same way. We obviously know that we will need to have staffing for the Washington Park pool. That facility is in design. We don't anticipate that opening at the earliest till June of next year. Of course, you all know our fiscal year begins in July, so we're talking about possibly a month in there. Of course, we would have to hire folks prior to that as well. We'll watch this one, and then based on the schedule of how it's actually happening, then we will make a determination as to the best way to actually begin hiring those. Another option we have that we will explore is seeing if we can restart the relationship we had before with the YMCA to see if, or the Gators for that matter, to see if either of them would be willing to take on the operations of the pool, which would preclude us from having to actually staff it. So that's why that item's not funded.
So this 368,000, it was just strictly for the pool staff?
Correct,
Only,
correct.
just for staffing the pool?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, yep. And we know there has to be staff. There's just not time for that staff yet with it.
Now, with the Eureka Center staffing and you having the activities that you're having over there, I guess with the open gym, I guess that's the only thing you're offering. Are you offering any kind of programs, any activities for the youth in that neighborhood?
There are the
in that community?
after-school programs that are there, the summer.
During the summer,
People
they
be
having
there.
just as open activities
Yeah,
there?
all that
They've
will be there
always-
as it has been in the
Yeah.
past.
I was gonna
And
say
you
they've
have
always had
adequate
that.
staffing for that?
Correct, with the
Okay.
outsourcing that we're doing.
Oh,
yes,
with the
yes,
outsourcing,
yep,
okay.
yep. Yeah, this is really tied to when we have a bigger footprint, we're gonna
Okay,
need more people.
right,
so,
okay.
yep. And then the special event staffing is really an idea that still is percolating, that there's the possibility with some of the special events that we have going on that we could actually raise some additional funds with those. And if so, then we would actually look at some of the staffing needs associated with that. So this idea is not an idea that has gone away. It's just an idea that we want to explore. I want us to explore what the revenue producing parts of that are first and find out what that could be before we actually try to hire anyone.
And what type of staffing, does this include?
Those would be folks like cleaning up
Oh,
with the special
okay.
event, and coordinating the special event as well. So
Okay.
think of like Go Fest is a good example of that, but those.
Do
those
we
kinds
have
of
a special
activities.
events coordinator on,
We do.
do we? We do, okay.
And then the last one was the libraries had requested, as they often do when we're redoing libraries, funding for additional collection or books within the facility. Obviously, much like I just mentioned with Eureka and Washington Park, we know that's a cost that will have to be borne. However, in the CIP, we've moved that project out to 26 or 26. The CIP is in 26, so it'll open probably in 27, at which time we'll revisit this as a part
And
of the
what
CIP.
type of renovations would be done at the Belmont Library?
So it is a partial redevelopment of what's inside, or refresh of what's inside, and an addition off on one of the sides. I don't know, I'm going to say the back side of it.
Okay.
So it'll create a little more space as well as an outdoor space with it, and then refresh it as well.
Make it similar to what's at the Williamson Road and the outdoor space wise?
Yes.
Such as
Yeah,
there?
pretty similar to both Raleigh Court.
Raleigh Court and Williamson
Road.
Road, okay.
Yep. And so that's it, that's on those. So we're not recommending any changes, I just wanted to be able to explain to you sort of, as people brought up concerns regarding the pool and Eureka, we know those have to be staffed, it's just not the time to staff them yet. We'll do that as we proceed forward with those projects. All right, I think this is the last one, and I'm probably gonna actually lean on Chris to come up here and kind of explain this one. I'll set the stage for him and then have him sort of explain. This is actually, now I'm going slightly off, we're going slightly offline here in that everything I just covered is what is in and what was raised relative to the budget, so as was submitted. We also, if you remember at the public hearing, we had three public hearings actually. We had another public hearing that was on the HUD, basically our HUD program. And in there was, of course, conversation regarding TAP funding. So even though it's a separate budget from it, I wanted to be able to use it as a part of this, also because depending on what anyone wants to do, it could have implications to the non-HUD budget, the general fund budget portion of it as well. But I'm going to let Chris kind of explain sort of how the HUD budget got created, and then why the decisions were made that were made out of that process, and why those recommendations came to you all in the way that they did.
Thank you, Bob. We've been basically in January, we put out a request for, or closed applications for CDBG, home, and ESG funding. These are alphabet soup, but the one we're concerned with today is CDBG funding. These are our most flexible sources of funding. And at your public hearing last week, TAP expressed concern over funding for some of the programs and applications that they put in. So one was rent relief. They requested funding from our public services pot, if you will. So CDBG has a subcategory of public services. And these are generally funds that go to individuals for individual assistance. And so that funding is it's a percentage of our total amount of CDBG funds that we get. And so it's very limited, it's capped. And so we had 4 out of 10 requests that we were able to fund. All of those were very, very heavily leveraged funds. In other words, our funds would result in fourfold in some cases and even higher amounts of leveraging to help those in our community. And so I think that was one of the major factors that we saw that led to the award picture that they had for these public service funds. I have about like 4 or 5 different spreadsheets in my laptop here that I can get details for you if you want them. And so that was the situation with that. Again, a lot of disappointment, and we were not able to fund all the very worthy applications that came in. So we do have to make choices. Again, going back, we're not looking at these in a vacuum. We were having a first, all these applications go through a first staff assessment, but then more importantly, they go through a review by community members, a committee of community members that are familiar with these programs, and they rank them and evaluate their relative value. Yes, Mr. Collison.
Any look at what removing rent relief might do to our homelessness population, like increasing or decreasing?
I'm not sure what that's going to be. That's something that we'll have to continue to monitor. That certainly will have an impact on that. Sure.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, Mr. Chittum. Do we offer any relief now or continue to offer any relief for rent eviction relief through the homeless assistance team?
We do not.
We do not.
We applied for a grant last year and were not funded because of our. Exactly. Yeah, I personally worked on that to try to get us a program, and actually working with TAP to manage that, and the funds simply did not. They went to other localities.
That's too
Well,
bad.
there are federal funds that are ceasing at the end of May.
Yeah, because they do have some. I was just wondering if they would continue.
And that's leaving a hole too, that TAP, particularly with their veterans housing and relief, that's, we were just hearing about that last week, that federal funding is ceasing now. So instead of an extended stay in a location, for example, at a hotel, that's going to be limited to 60 days flat. And then some of the other funding sources are ending, but those are federal funds.
So on there, on your second bullet, there you say only 4 of 10.
Yeah, we have received 10 requests in the public services category.
And one was TAP included in that?
They were not included in the 4. They were included in the 10.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's correct.
they were part of the 10. And your criteria, you picked 4. And TAP was not one of the
Correct.
4 to offer. And the reason for that again was why TAP was not when they have been in the past?
Well, the committee recommendation, the committee ranking, and the amount of leveraging, I think, was a major factor in looking at what programs did get funded. Again, we were able to take a very limited.
And who was the 4?
The 4, I can look that up for you. Okay, so the four who were funded were Children's Trust, Children Advocacy Center Program. Their request was for $32,593, and they were fully funded.
Right, I saw that.
Their matching funds were $639,000.
Okay.
The Bradley Free Clinic was funded at their full request of $125,000. They leveraged that 125 with $394,000.
Right, they brought in, okay. For
And,
the dental services.
correct. And
Okay.
Presbyterian Community Center over in Belmont Fallon, Pathway for Youth Program, funded at a reduced amount, just under $40,000, and the request was $50,000. They are leveraging that with well over about $250,000.
Okay. And TAP had asked for,
Total Action Progress
I think
had
they had four.
requested 218,249.
and they didn't have anything to leverage it with.
The match is not showing it. I've got to open up another spreadsheet to
Okay,
show
please.
proposed matches. They had proposed a match of 11% for that, which was $24,000.
Oh, that's, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you give us the fourth one, or did you? I
I'm
was
sorry?
waiting on the fourth one.
I didn't,
I was
yeah,
still
You
looking for
didn't get to
four.
it, right?
hadn't gotten
I
there
was
yet.
waiting, I was going to ask, go ahead, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
and then the fourth one was Children's Trust, court-appointed special advocates. They were fully funded at $58,000. Yeah, and they were leveraging with $178,000.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. The total funding available was just barely above
Just a
one of these full programs
Right,
that
and that's
TAP
what
was
I was
applying
adding
for,
up,
so
yeah,
it's
so
very
I
difficult.
could
to-
understand that.
Again,
That puts it in perspective.
we'd love to fund every single one of the programs at the full amount. They're all worthy.
I appreciate you being able to spread those dollars to those with the smaller amounts, and that was bringing money to the table as
Yeah,
well.
so, I mean, all in all, we're limited, we're capped at about $250,000, a little over $250,000, $254,000. We're leveraging $1.4 million with those dollars in the community in terms of benefit. Any other questions on that? Okay, so the other, TAP had two,
Just one
I'm sorry, Ms.
question.
Moon
Let me just step back in there.
Yeah, sure.
When you was talking about the funding, but yet, under the HUD administration, you have $733,450, and that is for employees and staff, is that right? What I'm seeing for HUD, I believe it's what I read. For
Yeah,
the
there's
HUD.
a
Yeah, for the department.
$357,049.
Yeah, the total came to $723,450 from the different pockets of money that was laid out. My understanding is, and correct me, that HUD does not allow the CDBG money to be used for staffing, for salaries and employees. That's what I was told. Is
Yes,
that-
we have a whole division that's funded with
Right,
CDBG
but I was told
funding.
that was not in there to be compliant. I'll double check that again. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have always, and HUD has a cap on use of CDBG funds for administration, but they fully recognize and every entitlement community that gets CDBG funds uses a portion of those funds
Yeah.
to administer them, because there's a lot
Yeah.
of monitoring and work that goes on with each one of these
Yeah.
projects requires a
Is
contract.
that also bringing in where you have your code enforcement that's over in the fund salary and benefits?
That is
For the
not-
three?
That's an actual direct activity to the community, so it is not considered an administrative cost.
Right, but it covers that as well, although it's not administrative cost, but it covers that for three employees.
That's correct.
Still employees, okay. Okay,
And we've had that in place for over a decade.
right, okay, I just heard it had changed, and I just wanted to
Yep.
make sure, I'll double check it. Thank you.
And so, So moving on, the other items, Tappet also submitted applications for a major rehab program and a limited emergency home repair program targeted in the Belmont-Fallon neighborhood. Both of these were ranked pretty low by our committee, and but not all the committee members. But overall rank it was, and then the amount of leveraging, again, kind of tells the story here about how things filtered out, and and from year to year, there may be very worthy projects that come in the door where if we funded this program for the last 10 years, there might not be funding available in this year because it's competitive. And so we know that it's certainly a council priority that I've heard when we are trying to generate affordable housing units. And we have two great projects in the hopper right now that we can facilitate the creation of nearly 50 units with a project that Community Housing Partners is proposing, as well as one by Restoration Housing. And so those we're trying to support those so we actually get more affordable housing projects generated. So,
Now, is there anyone else other than TAP that will be able to offer major rehab?
So major rehab, no.
So what are we going to do
Right,
about
so,
the-
so with those are, so the major rehab projects in terms of taking a house that is unused and renovating it and for new housing, Habitat for Humanity has kind of stepped into that space. They are doing, I think, 5 rehabs rather than building new stick-built houses on site. So they have moved into that space, and so they are being funded for 5 of those in the Belmont-Fallon target area. Actually, 4 in the Belmont target area and then 1 outside. And then minor rehab, limited rehab, Renovation Alliance does, and they are being proposed for funding of $75,000 toward that effort.
So there will be someone that will be able to assist with the unsafe conditions for occupants, especially the low-income ones,
That's what-
to help them do repairs.
That's what
Well,
renovation.
well, I guess, yeah. What about with regards to the weatherization? Will that still be in place with TAP still offering that? Because that's part of rehab also.
I am unsure as to whether they would continue that program without this funding.
That's what I'm concerned about.
We do have the Healthy Homes project.
That's true,
that
right.
we're operating, does offer some of those as
So the
well.
funding would be there to adequately take care of?
Yeah, I don't know how much of the weatherization piece would fall into that. That really deals with lead remediation, mold remediation, those
yeah.
elements of repairs. You know, the weatherization program, I don't know, because I don't know if our source of funding is the only source of funding that TAP uses for that weatherization program.
I think they have some other sources for that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're still just not cutting ourselves off at
Sure.
the knees
And-
and not still being able to provide. I understand what the committee said and leveraging the funds, but my concern is still if, as they had said, I think when they spoke in my notes, that they were the ones who offered that major rehab. And I just want to make sure we're still covering that.
And
If you
again-
take away something, you replace it with something else.
Right, yeah.
And it's,
And typically, the major rehab, as opposed to the emergency, is kind of it's not an emergency, it's something
Right.
that if you can't take care of it in the coming year, it might be able, might be a project in future years. And so we may see a totally different picture because, in FY '25, because 2 of the projects that are consuming some of the funding, which we really want to support this year, might not be in the mix in FY '25.
yeah.
So this is kind of an abnormal year, but again, if we want to create new affordable housing units, we really need to foster those organizations that are doing
Doing it.
exactly
Okay.
that. So again, it's trade-off. If I had plenty of money, which
I
we
understand.
don't, again, as I mentioned in my briefing to you last week, our funding is at same, not adjusted for inflation, exactly the same as it was in 1993. And so those fundings are, that funding is from the federal government to localities is shrinking just by being the same, because our buying power is
Okay.
so low. Again, we ask these committees and our staff to make tough choices to present to you what we believe to be the best mix of community use of these community development funds.
Okay, and who served on the committee?
Let's see, we had 3 different committees, and I hope that I'm able, you have those?
Have it?
Only because I anticipated.
You must have knew.
So on one of them, it's Jordan Bell, Tom Carr, Alicia Merchant, Dave Prosser, Sonny Pervians, Kenneth Rogers, Chris Tilley-Lubbs, Damon Williams, John Garland,
Okay, that was community.
Pam Monterio, Preston Tyler, Beth Deal, and Aaron Bush.
And that was for the community,
Community Development Block
right,
Grant Funds.
okay.
The Public Service had a different committee.
And this one was Tim Saraby, Helen Ferguson, Tanya Jones, Paula Prince, Reverend Charles Wilson, Tamara Starnes, Amazetta Anderson. Amazetta Anderson.
Amazetta.
She'd shoot me if she heard me say Amazetta. So
Yeah,
Amazetta
she's gonna
Anderson,
come in here.
Leslie Clark, Tanisha Nash, and Molly Roberts.
Okay,
And then those that were affiliated with it, so these are folks that are in the industry, I guess, if you will, that also help us with this, is Lee Clark, Melora Horn, who's with RCPS, Tanya Jones, Annette Lewis, Paula Prince, Isabel Thornton, Brian Hill, and Ashley Bowman. So
Okay.
those are the folks that are.
okay.
So,
That's
Mr.
good to
Howell,
know.
I noticed that the names have changed, so you all have,
Correct. So we changed
That is
based on the
excellent.
EAB. What we've done
Yeah.
is, so what Keith now does is he solicits from a group of people ideas for these names, and then ultimately forwards them as the EAB recommended to me for approval of those positions. And that's,
I'm
yes.
glad to see that happen. I know that did come out, a request came out of the EAB, and that has happened, and I think that is
And Keith did a really good job of making sure that
Yeah.
it was really good
I'm
diversity.
glad, because
very
we
diverse,
had mentioned that
and
last year
you certainly
about the
cannot
committee.
question those individuals that they
Yeah,
have compiled there.
that's what I wanted to hear. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's great.
Appreciate that.
Thank y'all. So,
Nice segue.
yeah, that was perfect. So, and I think, the last thing I'll say on that is I'll just reinforce what Chris said as well, which is any of the projects that were not funded in those selections are not without their own tremendous merit. I mean, that is definitely not the case. It was really annually, we have to revisit those and determine where the best way to spend those dollars are. And good part of it is that, in this upcoming funding, as Chris said, we've got actually more money than we've ever been able to put toward housing production, which is really key, really important in the community and stuff as well. So those were the items that were identified out of the public hearing. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge there were 2 individuals who spoke about lowering the tax rate. Obviously, we didn't recommend that in the budget that was proposed, and certainly haven't had any indication from council other than the changes in the thresholds for the tax freeze of any regard to that. And there was also a comment made regarding the compensation plan, which certainly be happy to answer questions about as well. But we didn't include any items in there because they were really associated with the tax rate piece of it, not with the rest of the budget submissions.
I would like to spend just a minute or so on the compensation piece. I did speak with you, Bob, brought up the concerns I had with the 3%. I did appreciate the compensation study of trying to bring people up within near the, I guess, the minimum, along with giving them their raises, and that it did not, unfortunately, not able to, I guess, do anything for that 200. I guess the number's 200.
Yeah.
But my concern was with the 3% that we were giving to the constitutional officers, which will get theirs, most of it from the compensation board. Mine was with the council appointed, the directors, and the ACMs, was the fact that that did lead to at least $3,200 up to $7,000 and some. And I just felt that when we look at And I know that we appreciate our directors, but I appreciate the low man more, who has to do the grunt work, who still, is still trying to get raised up. And I think when I look at six figures versus some that's only at 31 or even below $31,000, I just feel that we need to just do a little bit more for them. And with that said, I would rather look at a flat rate across the board for the ACMs, the council-appointed officials, as well as the directors, than looking at the 3% percentage. And see what that does look like, if there is something there that can compensate to the 200.
And just one point of clarification on that, the 200 individuals that we were not able to move to the full minimum are all receiving a 7% pay increase.
They just, but it still doesn't give them a
That's
little bit
correct.
more up.
But I'm just saying, it was a
Yeah.
7%.
Yeah.
You had indicated that
And-
they didn't receive anything. I just
And,
want to make
okay,
sure.
and
Yeah.
even at that 7%, they still, well, even across the board for all of them, the ones that are getting the 2,000 and something, that is good. But when I look at you making, little or nothing, I just think, again, even so, with money being the way it is, I just think for those, a flat amount should be sufficient, even if it's looked upon, because it affects their fringe benefits. It goes into the pension, and it continues to raise up higher, faster than what the employees are going to get. And I just feel that we just need to do a little bit better for the employees to try to retain them, even though some of them are uneducated, don't have anywhere to go, but yet they are the loyal employees with the years of service. And those older ones that are the ACMs, the council-appointed officials, and the directors, they have options of leaving after they get into the pension plan or staying. But the fact remains that they are getting a comparable salary that can keep them in the position. And I just want to do a little bit more to show that we do care about them by presenting a flat amount than giving them the 3% across the board.
Mr. Cow?
Mhm,
Oh, I'm
sure.
sorry. So considering what Ms. Moon Reynolds just said, and if you were to take that percentage from the appointed officials and the ACMs, with that amount of money that you would have, if, I'm just saying, these are all hypotheticals, what would be the methodology of distributing that among the 200 people? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out in my head, how would you
I don't know, because
what would be
we've-
the process?
Again, those individuals have received under this approach a 7% pay increase. I actually can't take anything away from the comp board
Sure,
individuals.
right.
They may actually get as much as a 7% increase depending on the state budget with it. I don't know, because, I mean, if the 3% is below, and Ms. Moon Reynolds knows because we talked about this, the 3% is below the 7% that Roanoke County, for example, is paying those same positions in Roanoke County. So I think it puts us at a competitive disadvantage. Even the 3% puts us at that with it. And once you remove what is the comp board positions from that total amount, I don't know what you have left. And if you allocated those across the 200 individuals, remember, the 200 individuals are across the full spectrum
Right,
of
they're
pay.
different,
There are people in there
kinds
who
of
are making,
service.
there are people in there who are making, $60,000, $70,000, who are still below their minimum, who fall into that category with it. And there are folks that are making $32,000, $33,000, who fall below that minimum category. So I don't know.
Ideally, it sounds, really good, but I just think, just the way you would be able to calculate that and the way you would be able to distribute it would be so complex. I'm just trying to
Well,
understand
and-
how it would work.
Again, I mean, our recommendation, my proposal for the budget doesn't propose to penalize our directors in order to provide an additional benefit to the rest of the employees. I think we tried to strike a balance between what the lowest paid employees are receiving in increases, while at the same time being responsible to our directors as well, so.
But they will be compensated, though, in 2025. I ran into one of the inspectors, and she said that, that she was one of the 200, but she did say that they would get it in 2025.
So our objective is, as we mentioned when I presented the budget, our objective is, assuming revenues, remain strong, our objective would be that those individuals who still are below their minimum become our top priority to move them toward, to move them to that minimum in the 2025 budget with it. Now, again, I can't predict where we'll be in revenue, but that is the intention,
Well, I
is the
hope
plan.
so. I would like to see them
That's my
compensated as well.
concern, is because you hear all about the recession coming.
Yep.
And even if it's just not the 200, I just still think that our top management staff is more than adequately compensated.
And I think that's the difference here. that
And
we're-
that's the
we're not-
difference there.
I don't think what Ms. Moon-Reynolds is proposing is actually intended to take money from the directors to allocate it.
Correct.
It's actually to not provide the directors with a pay increase, and I disagree
It
with
is
that.
to provide them with a pay increase, but
Not the
across the
3%.
board, but not the 3%.
Correct. And
I
the-
would rather see a flat amount given to them, that they all receive, they're not percentage-wise, that, like I said, because it does increase their pension, and that's what we are looking at as you grow the pension. And you saw where we're having to put money into the pension because of salaries that, unless I'm wrong even
No,
with
that's not-
that.
that's not
But I
accurate.
know, well, it may not be accurate, but I just know that they benefit from it. Once you get past 5 years, you are vested. And
So are you suggesting like once, like if they don't get this increase, to take that surplus, possibly whatever that amount in excess would be, and redistribute it among the 200?
no, he answered that. So I'm
Oh,
okay
okay.
with that, but he's right. I'm just looking at putting that money back into the general fund, using it for something else.
Oh,
that
okay,
we're
I thought
short
you meant
on.
for compensating the
Yeah,
ones that didn't
no,
get
we need to take
compensated.
away from
And just-
compensation.
And just to be clear,
but-
the,
Oh, okay.
even the flat rate would still go into fringe benefits as well.
Right, I understand that. It just wouldn't be as fast as you look at another year, you start putting in a percentage, and it keeps continuing to grow.
Oh, okay. I
and
thought
grow
we were trying to
and
figure out how
grow
to
and grow.
compensate that 200, because
Yeah.
I was going
So,
along with
no,
that.
when he
and-
already
also the-
answered that, so I was fine with
And also the
that.
pension,
Yeah.
piece, just to be clear, the $5 million we're paying into it is due to the overall liability. It's not due to anybody's pay increases.
Right.
That money we're putting in is because of the performance of investments. That's why that money is.
And also to put on the table, we also, for most of them who are in the upper echelon of the administration, they get the perks. One is that the pay supplement, some of them will get that. So you look at all of that added in, although it doesn't tie into the base salary, but I just look at your fringe benefits, the whole package deal. And I just feel that somewhere along the lines, even though we say we are not part of the marketing for private, you come and work at the city is a good place to work, and you get a better benefit package. So I just say with the salaries, we just need to bring that down a little bit, especially for the top, and not as much for the lower, because if you have a recession, the first ones to go is going to be your low. And they are the ones who are the ones that are hurting the most.
So there are some sentiments I agree with on this. You know, when we look at a budget, we say, what is your, if you show me your budget, what are your morals, or what are your goals? And, this year we set out in the budget that we were going to get people up to market rate. Now we have 200 folks that are not in that market rate. So I'm not necessarily advocating for taking from one to the other, but what I am trying to advocate for is that we make sure we get everybody up to asking this year. Because I do believe that if there is a recession, that those are the people that are going to get pushed off again and again and again, and we've done that for decades here. So is there a way to, I guess my question would be, is there a way for you guys to look at this raise in a different way that gets everybody up to that point?
No. I mean, we've looked at it. There's, just to give you a sense of, so we've got $9 million that we've proposed in compensation increases, of which I think our estimate was 170,000, something like that, is what's going to the top echelon, as has been referred to, out of 9 million.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the 9 million is going to all of those other employees. At the time we were calculating to get everyone up to minimum, that number is somewhere around $12 million. So it's
It's about a $3 million difference.
it's a significant increase between those. And remember, we've got folks who are, and that's including fringe, because you got to calculate fringe in with it.
Right.
So we have folks that are actually getting $25,000 increase from this year, because they're that far below minimum.
Right.
So we're able to move in DSS, for example, we're able to move folks up to that, just as we did with public safety. We had firefighters and police officers who went from $54,000 to $72,000 through that project, through that process that we put in place. So the dollar amounts, to your point, we're trying to reconcile a decade-plus challenge here, and we're trying to do it in fairly short number of years. And you all know I've said this, and I've said this to the directors, I've said this to the employees too, is that even what we're doing, whether it be public safety or this $9 million, we do with way beyond my comfort level. We are way into the territory where if indeed we do hit a recession, it absolutely will result in layoffs. There's no question. There's just no question, because, and that would be even more so if we actually moved everybody. If we figure out some way to find another $3 million, moved everybody to the minimum, it would result in that, because we've got such distance to make up with it. But we have to. If we don't do it, we won't have anybody working here. I mean, if we don't move folks, then we just simply won't have folks working here. And remember, this is only phase one, because this is just to get people to the minimum. That's not where we want to leave people. I mean, our goal is to actually then disperse them through the pay grade that they're in as well, just like we did with fire and police and the sheriff, and now we're into this other piece. So, yeah, I mean, there simply was not enough money to actually make that happen this time.
I guess the question then would be, what was the determining factor to those that did not get a raise?
They did get a raise.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, they did not
Yes.
get brought
They
up
got
to
the largest
minimum.
raise,
Sorry.
actually.
Yes, I know they do. They all
Largest
get
raise
raises,
we've actually
yes.
given in a decade. So,
Yeah,
yes.
yes, I apologize.
Yeah, we simply had to pick. So if you remember, we had what we referred to as kind of the Head Start groups, which with your all help, we kind of identified who those were. And this is again after public safety. So public safety was already addressed. So we identified DSS, Department of Technology, some of the positions, and some of the positions in DSS, some of the positions in Department of Technology, some of the positions in solid waste, and some of the positions in, who am I missing? E911. And so the first step was to keep that promise and finish those groups out. So finish the rest of DSS, finish the rest of E911, and so on. And we did that. We were able to move. So all of those departments, folks, are all at the new minimum, whether they are the entry-level administrative assistant or if they're the supervisor. They are all now at the new minimum. And that itself was somewhere around 3.5, 5 million. I don't remember the exact number. But that took a lot of money out of this $9 million increase. Then we took everyone and said, okay, folks that are already at or above the minimum, we're not just going to say, sorry, just live with it. And so the $2,000 number was what we had used with the Head Start folks. That's why we selected that number and said anyone who's at or above that minimum, you're going to get at least that $2,000 increase. For some, that was more than a 7% pay increase. For others, it was less than, maybe a 2% pay increase, depending on how you actually went up in the grades. Then that left us with folks who were still not in those Head Start groups, but below their minimum. And so we said, okay, we've got to advance everyone to that new minimum. And that was our starting point. Advance everyone to that new minimum. What's the bill for that? And we couldn't afford it. So then we had to start figuring out an alternative. So what do we cap that with then? What numbers do we pick? And 7% was just the number we landed on. It was the number that we knew we could afford and still get done the things that we've talked about here in the rest of the budget. It also happened, we didn't know it at the time, it happened to coincide with the pay increase that Roanoke County was doing, which is leading the area. Their pay increase was 7%. Most of the others were around 5%. Although the Water Authority 7%, I think the school will probably be at 5 or 7% by the time the state actually acts. So that was how we kind of landed in that ballpark with it. And again, some of those folks now are within a couple $1,000s or maybe even a few hundred of their new minimum. Others still remain more than $10,000 below their minimum, and that's the gap we have to close with the next budget.
So essentially, Mr. Kyle, we're looking at $3 million to get everybody to.
Well, and remember, we've got to carry, so we had about $10 million worth of increases for public safety over the last couple of years. So we got to make sure we can carry all that forward. And we just added, if approved, we've got $9 million of new cost. We got to carry all of that forward. And then, yes, then our next objective is take those individuals, if that number is 2 million, 3 million, whatever it might be, then we want to close that gap. While at the same time, we need to move on to that next phase as well, which is how do we move people from the new minimum up to something else?
To the competitive rates, which
Yes,
we have
start-
even.
And we know it's going to take us a couple of years to get there. We can't do all of that in 1 year. And again, all that's dependent on if the revenues stay strong. Because, if we stop having revenue, and we talked about recession, but even if we stopped, even if we're flat, and have no revenue growth, that will be, because we will have costs that will increase that will require us to address at that time. But
And even with that said, you're still with the 3% to your top, you're still carrying that forward. So so you're still gonna have to have the compensation for them.
Correct.
So if you do a flat amount, you're not carrying as much forward, in my argument.
Well, it would be less,
It would
absolutely.
be a lot
You'd still have
less.
mo- you'd
You
still have more
still
to
carry
carry over.
something forward, but you're not carrying